Alright, so welcome back, grade 10s. This is lesson 3, Economic Globalization, part 1. And it's part 1 because we'll keep coming back to that topic all year. In this lesson, you're meant to be able to define global trade, list some examples and barriers to it, define containerization, connect the word to globalization, and connect industry to environmental and labor abuses as a result of globalization. And in order to do these 3 things, also down here in green, we have a series of short videos. Now, I'm not going to tape us watching the videos, because then this lecture would be like 45, 50 minutes long, and most of it is just us watching a video. But what I'd like to do here is just have an introduction. What do we think the answers are going to be, right? So, the first part is define global trade. What do we think global trade is? Yes, sir?
Trading around the world.
Trading around the world, right? Global trade around the world. So it's probably trade between, at a micro level, because you mentioned micro, macro earlier. At a micro level, it might be me as a consumer buying stuff from another country, or me as a producer selling stuff to consumers in other countries. At a macro level, it might be trade among nations. So Canada is trading with China, and China is trading with Ecuador, and Ecuador is trading with Vietnam, and Vietnam is trading with Egypt, and Egypt's trading with Germany. So it might be that kind of network of trade, global trade. Any other thoughts on global trade? Yes, sir?
It could be exchanging what you have a lot of for something you don't have.
Yeah, so you asked at the beginning of class about comparative or competitive advantages. So Canada, because of our climate and our natural resources, we have some comparative advantages. Compared to other countries, we have an advantage. And compared to other countries, we may have a disadvantage. So a country like Ecuador has a comparative advantage of growing and selling bananas, and Canada does not. So we need to import bananas from them, and we'll export something like maple syrup from here to them that they don't have an advantage growing. So global trade is taking advantage of comparative advantages due to different climates, different resource realities. Yes, sir?
Well, a barrier one might have is, well, I was reading in the textbook and it was talking about how some of these Inuit nations traded amongst themselves, but some had forest trees, some had soapstone, but easily malleable.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a barrier would be, what's the word? Not necessarily boycotting, but like
Tariffs.
yeah, they like stop selling them something.
Yeah, so a barrier, he was talking about how the Inuit had a very sophisticated exchange system where some had timber, some had soapstone, and therefore they had comparative advantages, and there was a trade system that existed. But there may be a time where 2 countries end up having a dispute, and they might, and you were saying maybe the word's not boycott, maybe they'll raise economic tariffs. So you can have trade wars. Canada and the United States are allies, and we at times have had trade wars over issues like softwood lumber. The Americans cannot compete with the price we can sell softwood lumber for. So softwood lumber producers in the United States want to protect themselves from Canadian imports. So, make a long story short, what's a potential barrier? Would be a tariff. A tariff is a tax charged at the border. So if you're an American trying to import Canadian softwood lumber, you have to pay the price that the company you're importing it from wants, but then you also have to pay the government a tax because you're buying something from out of country. So that might be a barrier, a tariff. Any other barriers? Yes?
Just like war.
War. So we'd like to buy something from you, but our supply lines are disrupted. During a war, we might not be able to get oil from the Middle East, so we might need to find it closer to us. Yes, sir?
A boundary could be like North Korea, how they want to preserve their ideals, and if they're importing things and ideas from around the globe will come to them and their people can start rebelling.
Yeah, so one of the barriers to global trade might be politics. It might be government policy. So like North Korea is practicing isolationism that has led to a hermit state. So if you're in that hermit kingdom, then you're not able to import goods easily because your state has created an absolute wall around it. Yes, sir?
Could be illegal.
Could be illegal, right? And in North Korea, it would be illegal to say consume Canadian movies. Not that we have many good movies. Yes.
There could just be geographical obstacles.
Yeah, geographic obstacles. It's a long ways away. I'd love to import something from Australia, but there's a cost factor because it costs too much. Now we'll get to containerization that made it a little cheaper, but it costs too much to get there. Next question, define containerization. So you did a little bit of reading. What do we have so far, Luke?
I'm assuming it has something to do with the use of large containers in mass quantities being shipped.
Look at that, just breaking down the language like that. So good assumption. Has something to do with having, containers, large containers in large quantities on a ship, shipping stuff. So it could be said, and it will be said, containerization is like the lifeblood of global trade. That 90+% of global trade isn't happening in the air. It's happening along the water in these containerized ships. Why would they do it? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? It's cheaper. It's cheaper. There's less resistance pushing something across the waves than having to get it up to 25,000 feet and push it across the air. So global trade, one of the lifebloods is containerization, and therefore it connects the world. Next up, connect industry, and this is important for that source that you're analyzing tomorrow. Connect industry to environmental abuse, and then connect industry to labor abuse. So how might globalization allow industry to abuse the environment? Jack?
If a government halfway across the world has a lot more lax restrictions on what you're allowed to do with the land, then you can completely burn and pillage it so that it's ready to be used, and that destroys biodiversity.
Yeah, perfect. I couldn't have said it better. So let's say that you're a corporation. The number one thing you want is profit. How can you ensure profit? You cut costs. Sometimes you can cut costs by doing things in a less clean way. So you go to a country, like maybe Mexico, where they have more lax environmental standards so that you can contaminate the river. So you don't have to deal with the byproduct, the externality of your industrialized process. Absolutely. I think you've been waiting. Yep.
So, the problem with the environment is that a cotton t-shirt takes a lot of water
Yep.
to make it. And then you have to worry about transporting it across oceans to...
So time out for a second. You're wearing a hockey t-shirt there, right? The Habs. And we do have this quick video today about a life of a t-shirt. Did you watch that last night?
Yeah.
There it is, because it sure sounded like it. You're like, man, you're on fire here. And that's why it's nice to have these videos there that you can preview. So the life of a t-shirt, I have one underneath here. It seems like, oh man, my t-shirt only costs $5, but there's an added burden that your t-shirt is to the environment. So even though it costs $5, it doesn't mean that there's only a cost of $5 to the planet. That there's a burden that the planet has to pay for the production and the transportation and eventual destruction, or the throwing into the garbage of that t-shirt. Couple more thoughts? Yep.
Like a Western nation wants a product really bad, like bananas or something.
Yep.
And Ecuador's like, oh, we got bananas.
We've got some bananas.
And like Canada, who has a lot of money and influence, can say, demolish the forests, plant more bananas.
Yep.
Because they couldn't do that on their own.
I like Brazilian beef, so what do? They burn the rainforest so that they can have more land for their cattle. So I can eat those Brazilian burgers. Why wouldn't I eat Alberta beef? Exactly, right? Alberta beef's better, but a lot of people really like Brazilian steaks and they go to a Brazilian steakhouse and stuff like that. I think they should just eat Alberta stuff, buy local, it's better. But that's an example of globalization, creating an environmental footprint. Yes?
It could be taking too much from the environment, like a garbage dump.
Yeah. So they might be taking too much or giving too much back to the environment. Maybe it takes too much to create the product, or maybe by creating the product it creates too much waste.
So back to your point about the beef, wouldn't it just be cheaper to get Alberta beef here?
Mm-hmm. So why do we do it? Some people just like the idea of having Brazilian. The idea that, there's a cattle farmer in Brazil that is raising steaks for them. And it seems more exotic. Even though, honestly, Alberta beef is
AAA Alberta beef
is amazing product, right?
Alberta beef is actually
Research the banana industry and connect the industry to environmental and labor abuse. So we've talked a little bit about, the cost to the environment, but how could there be a labor cost to an industry like a banana industry? What do you think we're going to hear there? Yep.
Low wages.
Low wages?
Child abusing children.
Yeah, low wages, abusing children, using children. So if I'm a big company like Del Monte, it's a big banana company. I actually have a banana in my lunch kit that I've been carrying for like 3 days because, I eat everything first and then I get to the banana. I'm like, am I really that hungry? I'm going to eat this. Because the banana's been carried so long, it's not in ideal shape anymore. I remember that last year when we went into like emergency ed on March 15th, I had a banana in my lunch kit and I forgot about it, and I discovered that at the beginning of teaching summer school in July. It was not even just mush, it was liquid. It was disgusting. I had to throw my lunch kit out. There's no label on this one, but sometimes it'll say Del Monte. So Del Monte is just one of the corporations.
What would you eat? You gotta get your calories in.
I'm wasting away.
Why'd you talk so fast?
I am wasting away. So, definitely, how do banana corporations? Well, Del Monte might go to a country like Ecuador and say, hey, to the Ecuadorian government, you don't have a lot of industry happening here in Ecuador. We'd like to locate here, but what incentives can you give us? And if Ecuador is like, well, this is what we can offer you, they might look at that and say, you know what, Nicaragua is going to offer us more. So then they play countries off of each other because some of these transnational corporations in the banana industry, they have so much revenue, they have a tremendous power that they can wield over governments. So the question is, how can the banana industry be linked to labor abuse? A banana corporation like Del Monte might go to Nicaragua, and might go to Honduras and El Salvador and Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic, and they might say to these governments of these countries, who's going to allow me to abuse the labor the most? That's where we'll come and do our business. And we'll make sure that you make millions, but we're going to make millions too. But in order for me to make millions, I have to ensure that the workers work for very little wages, work for long hours, and we're not going to protect them against the pesticides and stuff that they're going to be exposed to. So that's a big part of that story. Yes, sir?
Question, is that like all of the Chinese factories, or is that just that their economy, they minimum wage is very low?
It's like some of that. Some of the reason why there's so many Chinese factories is because corporations moved to China because of environmental and labor laws being very lax. But honestly, some stuff that used to be made in China is now made in Vietnam because it's a whole lot cheaper to make it in Vietnam.
And like, we weren't, what is it, denim jeans?
Yep.
They were made in the US,
Mhm.
and now they're not.
Yep.
Don't make me feel bad.
So, like denim jeans used to be made in Canada. There used to be a Levi Strauss factory in Winnipeg, and then they moved that to China. But then maybe the Chinese workers start asking for too much money, and then Levi says, you know what, we're going to go to Vietnam instead. So when you look at the labels on your clothing, you're going to see lots that say made in China, but you're going to start seeing more and more that say made in Indonesia, made in Vietnam, maybe made in Egypt, because China is beginning to no longer be as desperate. So the workers in China get paid a little bit better. So now companies are starting to say, well, we can't go to China anymore. We're going to go to Vietnam. We're going to go to Indonesia. We're going to go to Egypt. We're going to go to Mexico, and we're going to do our production there. All right, so that's the introduction. I'm going to stop recording this, and we're going to watch just a few short videos to continue to answer those questions. But honestly, we just answered those questions. So the purpose of lesson 3 was to define global trade, check. Talk about some examples, check. Barriers, check. Define containerization? Check. How does it connect the world through globalization? Check. Environmental and labor abuses through industry and globalization? Check, check. So we've done these things, but now we're going to look at the videos to kind of finish the story.